Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. All right. We can get started anytime. You can just start by just talking. And then what I'll do is I'll come in here and edit out the stuff that we don't need.
Well, today is January 24th, 2011.
Yes.
So we're here talking to Barbara Hayes Bowers. And we really want to find out about some of the things that you've done, which are pretty amazing. First of all, just briefly tell us where you were born and where you brought up.
I was born in Anadarko, Oklahoma. I lived in Chickasha, Oklahoma for about 7 years. I went to school in Chickasha and also Anadarko for a while. And we moved to Altus. I went to school in Altus. This was, I forget the year, but I'll say probably about 52. I was going to school in Altus. Then we moved to Amarillo, Texas, and that's where I finished my years of schooling. However, I did not graduate. I finished with GED much later, in 73 in fact.
Well, I understand early on in your career you experienced some serious setbacks and found yourself in a state where you had major responsibilities. The loss of your husband. Briefly tell us about what brought you to that state.
Well, my husband died quite young. He was 47, sorry. He had the first heart attack at 37. He was at 38, so he was 47 when he died. And it left me with, I had 2 grown children that had left home, but there were still 2, a girl and a boy, Carla and Shannon. Larry and Donnie grew up and married. But I had that when I went in to sign up for Social Security, Shannon was 12 and Carla was 16. They told me that day that that was the year that the president, I think it was Reagan, I have to check it, had stopped paying for the college. Social Security had stopped paying for college, and I would have to find a way to educate my children. And I thought, oh boy, all I knew to do was just go to college myself. And that's what I did.
Tell us a little bit about your motivation for going to college and actually the degrees that you earned.
Okay, as I said, I knew I had to educate 2 children. And I lived 13 miles from Weatherford, Oklahoma, and that's where my college was, where a college was. So I knew I had to try to get there, and I had been out of school 19 years from the time I walked on that campus. It was quite funny. I cried all the way to school that morning, first class. You can't do this, but I got to do this. And I didn't know anything about the college, the campus. I had gone up and enrolled, but I really didn't know about the status of the buildings and everything.
The first degree you earned was BS or BA?
BS.
What was that in?
It was in Trade and Industrial Education. I'm sorry, it's been a few years ago. Trade and Industrial Education. And I earned that degree. I started in 86, January of 86, and I graduated with that degree in 88.
What motivated you to go in that particular area? Was it possible employment or just that you were interested in the field?
Actually, I already was cosmetology instructor, and I was happened to be doing one of my students that was from Africa. Sorry, one of my customers that was from Africa one day, and I told him that I wanted to go, and he suggested, why don't you choose something that you already know something about, and that's your being a homemaker. He said, do homemaking because you're already a homemaker. Well, that's how I started out, but I wound up, when I realized I could take my instructor's degree and convert it into 24 college hours. That's what made me go into trade and industrial. Plus, we had a Votech school about 22 miles from us at Burns Flat. So.
What were some of the things you were able to do with that BS degree?
Actually, it got me started into agency counseling. I worked for a place then called New Horizons, but it's now called Red Rock. And the reason I went, immediately I went on into getting my master's. And my master's was in secondary education and on counseling for high school and adults.
So actually the bachelor's degree led it to
Yes.
and motivated you to go
Yes.
on into the master's degree.
Yes.
Yes.
I looked up one day and I was coming home from school and I saw this young man that was riding a bicycle, which was stolen. And he had stolen a radio, but he had a radio all hooked up to that bicycle. I said, that kid knows industry, technology. And I thought somebody just needs to have a degree where they can talk to them and encourage them. And that's what prompted me to go into secondary education, getting my master's.
So it really was the counseling aspect that inspired you.
Yes.
And when you completed that degree, so you had a bachelor's degree, BS, and then you went into the master's program. How long did it take you to earn that degree?
The master's?
Yes.
I got my master's from, I had already started in, actually, a year and a half, probably, or two. See, what I did, I went round the clock, I went round the school year. I never took a term off. Plus, I carried as high as 23 and 24 hours, I really was after it.
Well, you were working all this time?
Yes, I had a beauty shop. That's what helped me. That was the era of Jerry curls. I'll call the real Jerry curl and go back to school. I went to school. It was just, I think realizing that it could feel the girl that listening. For living alone, for surviving alone, and that's what really motivated me with it.
And after completing your master's, I'm sure you felt quite good.
I did, I really did, because somebody had that being my age, by that time I was 50, and I immediately found a job. I remember Larry, my oldest one, telling me, Mom, very seldom people get out of college and immediately find a job in the field that they were going to school for. So I I thought, and then they also, Dawn told me, well, you always wanted somebody in the family to get a college degree. And since we didn't go, you just decided to go get one your own self. So,
Well, I guess there was a lot of truth in that because
yes.
you felt a need to be able to earn more money.
Yeah, yes.
What was when you were going in your undergrad and your graduate program, what seemed to be about the average age of students that you were in class with?
That's funny. They were all out of high school, like between 18 and 26, somewhere along, and maybe a few others. But one little boy, they paired us up, how the teachers pair you up and get you to interview each other. And when I told him when I was born and how old I was, he goes, "Wow, you're older than my parents." I said, yes.
Yeah. Now, when you received your master's, you moved into better employment. What type of jobs did you move into, and what motivated you to go into social work, and what opportunities did you find in that field?
The community that I lived in, and actually before Albert died, that was my first husband, he always, well, he had 3 jobs in his life. He was a fireman. He was in service first for 2 terms. Then he got out and he became a policeman, 9 years, and then he was on the police force. Sorry, he was a fire chief for 15. Fireman, worked his way up to fire chief. And everybody seemed to have come to his door. When he was a policeman, the community always wanted to come tell him something, get him to do something. So that got us in the community service. Everybody needs somebody that they could count on, and that got us into it.
Now, this is a big topic, and we'll maybe come back to it. But what was the racism issues? What were the racism issues that you had to face? And how big a factor was that as you moved into your work?
Mm-hmm. I remember this was after Albert died, I needed a car. We had perfect credit. Perfect credit. In fact, one guy told me I've never seen, he started to say blacks, but then he cut it off. And people with credit like this. But when I went to my own bank, right there in Clinton, which was Oklahoma Bank and Trust, we'd been banking there for years, and asked them to sponsor a loan for me at GMAC, I had that. They would have gotten, and in fact, that's where I finally had to go back and get it, because the bank, they wouldn't do it. They would not. So, and then there were other things I had to always look at. People just kindly and calmly stepped around you. "Oh, you're this. It's so nice to meet you. You're doing a good job." But nobody really. I remember living in Clinton, and from the year of 06 to 09, looking for a job with a master's education. And every time I went to apply, it was always, they didn't need anybody, or they got somebody, they found somebody else. And
did they ever tell you were overqualified?
Oh yeah, they would do that too, overqualified. And finally, I wrote for 2 years in a row, 98 and 99. I sat down, Carl Benson, Thomas Redwine, and myself sat down and wrote a proposal to the school for me to work for them in helping to get the children the truancy cut and the grades up, the education level up. And finally, the second year, that was the year they were shooting up schools all around the place. And I did some subbing, and I just wrote this proposal and told them I'd seen this could be explosive, that could be explosive. And then I remember Don Scales was superintendent at that time, and he told me, he said, "Barbara, you're right." He said, "Because I've seen some of these things myself." He said, he said, we're sitting kind of on a time bomb. And they took some drug prevention monies, and that was how they started me out for for 20 hours a week. And immediately I was working 40 and 50 hours because the work was so large. And I began to make such a change in truancy, the children, it was some of everything just began to, they could see, because so many kids didn't have medical, and their parents didn't have jobs. I would help the parents get jobs, help the parents get medical if they needed it, when they didn't have insurance on their jobs. I would get the doctors to see them. DHS worked with me, very faithful there. They would tell me, Barbara, we can help this, we can do that. And in fact, at one time, they wanted to hire me for them. And my school said no, because Barbara, you'll be doing nothing but paperwork. He said, here, we have you covered, and you don't need to do all of that. So that would have really hurt me. They wanted to join in and be half on the program, and the school said no.
Now, leading up to this major project that led to the academy and to the facility that was built, how did you get into that?
Well, Linda Thomas called me in, and she was school, I think she was associate superintendent or something, but anyway, they had been worried about the blacks' grades, and they kept failing. So when she called me in and told me, she said, Barbara, she said, look at this. She said the blacks' children our black children are failing farther, even behind, their scores are lower behind the Spanish with the language problem. So, but we also looked at the Spanish with the language problem had a lot of help. They were getting grants and so forth that was sent in to them so they could get extra tutoring. And the blacks were not getting this. So that's how we just decided we didn't have anybody to do it. So I went to the Lodge Brothers, the Lodge number 21, Masonic Lodge number 21. I went to them and asked them about their building, which at the time being they were not meeting in it because it was had a lot of damage done to it, the roof and the floor and just a lot of stuff. So what we did was, I remember Perry Adams, he was our superintendent by the time all this came down, and he said, Barbara, we've got to find some place to feed our children. He was talking about for the summer. I said, well, I don't have any place to go because the children were very destructive. They had done a lot of damage on the major churches that let us use them was Bethany Baptist and Southeast Church of Christ. And they had done damage at both. So they didn't want the kids back in their buildings. And so I just told him, I told Mr. Adams, I said, I don't have anywhere to go. I don't know what to do. I said, he said, well, Barbara, he said, across town they're building a $500,000 train. They're putting it together, track, to run through the park. And he said, we got to do something here. I said, well, I don't know what. But he went around and got some CRA, community reinvestment monies, from the banks, from 3 banks, and we came up with $3,000. Then we needed labor. That was to buy material with. But we needed labor. So what I did, I went to the different people around there in town and the churches. The churches were glad to help us so we'd have somewhere to put the kids. And it was a beautiful thing when the people of town of Clinton came out of the east side, as well as from across town. People just came down and went to work like little bees on that building. And I am telling you, we had new flooring, new roofing. And then the community started to volunteering and giving and donating. It was a beautiful thing.
Now, when was the facility actually completed, and what were some of the functions that went on in it?
That facility was completed. The lodge hall was completed in, let's see, it was about 4 years before we got our building. Most likely it was, I can't give you the exact year on it, but if we, 06 is when I left, and I would say about 02 is when the
but when
lodge
was the major facility?
Oh, what we were working up
Yes.
to was, we got on the referendum, on the ballot, and they voted to give us a place. 71% of the votes were to build East Side Academy, and that's when we have a $500,000 building right there today. And that was completed in 07. I think it was 07. Yes, because I left in 06. That was in 07.
Well, I suppose people did not want you to leave
No,
that area.
they didn't. And it was hard to leave. It really was. But I had met you, and we had so much in common that things that I wanted to work with.
Let me ask you this as we get ready to close out here. What was the most discouraging events or elements in your journey, and what was the most encouraging? We'll take about a couple of minutes and speak to that.
The discouraging was how we couldn't get along. Whenever we received monies, we began infighting, and that just didn't trust. That was very hardening to me. But my encouraging moment was the way that people over town just opened up and gave and worked and donated, and that was beautiful.
Well, you have a remarkable story here, and I wish I could have been more a part of it, because I hear so many wonderful comments and compliments about the work that you did, and I'm glad that you're still carrying on in a different way. It's been my pleasure to interview this remarkable lady who has many dimensions, many experiences, which I think will be valuable for those who may happen to view this particular phase or this particular series.
Did you tell who you were?
I'm signing off here. I'm Calvin Bowers, and I have a very special relationship to this lady at this time.